Taysom Hill leads the Saints to a win this week. The top dog race heats up, and we say what we are thankful for ahead of the holiday, plus all of the NFL news and more in 20 seconds. Hello, fellow fanatics. Welcome to the Average Bros Fantasy Show, brought to you by Football Darts and Fantasy Sports Alliance. Josh, how are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing today. Happy to see the Saints continue their seasonal trend with a backup coming in and continuing our winning streak.
Yeah, definitely nice to see. Got yourself a nice gift before the holiday. And speaking of which, as mentioned in the title of our show here today, we want to give thanks for everything that we have so far this season, and we want to start that off by thanking our sponsor today, Football Darts. Football Darts is a dart game that combines the skill of traditional darts with the strategies of American football. This innovative dart game is played on a uniquely designed multiple target dartboard. Unlike traditional British darts, American football darts is a game that combines both skill of darts and the strategies of football. It can be played at sports bars, at tailgate events, as league tournaments, or as a leisure activity in the comfort of your own home. If you want to check out their officially licensed collegiate dartboards, go to footballdarts.com. And they can also be found at Target and Wayfair now as well. And we never want to forget our leaders here at Fantasy Sports Alliance. Very grateful and thankful for Brian and the Empty Wagon guys, and you as well, Average Josh, and everyone behind the scenes here at Fantasy Sports Alliance. Remember, if you like the show today, please go out and share, subscribe, and like us on all of our social medias. They will be scrolling across the bottom here. And then if you can't find us or forget where we are at, you can always go to our website, fsa-fr.com, and you'll see all of our show times there. You'll see the Average Bros, the Fanatically Real broadcast, as well as now the Empty Wagon guys 2 nights a week on Saturdays and on Mondays. Go out there and check us out. Josh, it looks like you got, as you mentioned, a lot to be thankful for as a Saints fan, I would say.
Yeah, kicking it off with things that we're thankful for this week. Thankful for Taysom Hill coming off the bench with his first official start with the Saints, and had a really decent game. I know he didn't throw for any touchdowns, but ran 2 in, and all around looked very nice. There were times where, looking at the highlights and everything, because unfortunately wasn't able to actually watch the game, it just looked like he was kind of rushing himself a little bit, which led to some mistakes here and there, getting sacked. And I know he had the big run, which led to a fumble. I think that they found a good replacement for once Drew Brees decides to hang it up in the near future.
Yeah, and before I touch on that for a minute, I just want to remind everybody that is watching us live here on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter to go ahead and comment as we go throughout the show for things that you are thankful for, both in fantasy and the football realm and outside amongst your families and friends as well. We will throw the comments up on the screen and read them off here. But just like you said there, Josh, Taysom Hill stepping in helped me out a little bit. I didn't get to win this week having him in my lineup, but definitely thankful for players like Taysom Hill and what he brings to fantasy in general. Being a quote-unquote gadget guy, and then being able to be placed all around the ball, either lined up out wide, where I believe over 50% of his snaps are this year, being able to play quarterback or be lined up in the backfield as a running back in some options. So Definitely a versatile piece, and I think that they have found their guy for the future out of New Orleans. Once Brees hangs it up, do you think it is this season after this injury?
I believe that he did throw it out there at the beginning of this season that it was the final ride for him. I think that from what I saw this week, they really did find a good replacement for him in Taysom Hill. You know, it's kind of like your average Russell Wilson, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, somebody who can be accurate with the ball throwing it. They can also use their legs to pick up first down, couple extra yards, even a touchdown. And I think that with him being the actual starter, it kind of threw defenses off because in the past, when Drew Brees was the starter, but every time that Taysom Hill came out, you knew 9 times out of 10 uh, they were just running the ball right off the bat. So
Right.
now that he's out there full time, you know that they're going to mix in passes as well.
Yeah, for me, you're bringing up a younger player, a little less experienced in the quarterback game, and the person that I'm a little bit more thankful for this year than in years past, fantasy speaking, is Tom Brady. Not having a fantastic game this past week in the loss to the Rams, uh, ultimately getting me kicked out of the playoffs in FSA. But regardless, putting up a pretty good year so far. Uh, he has scored 254.5 points in the FSA and MFL scoring platform here. That's good for sixth best overall out of the quarterbacks, right in the mid tier of your QB ones. I know that we've had a conversation a little bit earlier off air about numbers deceiving players, right? Because he does have a negative game in there, a couple low scoring games, but then he's got a game at 37 and then two over 40, mixed in to raise his average up a little bit. But regardless, you got to think if you're a fantasy owner, you're definitely happy to have had him throughout the year, kind of as a better better quarterback within the league. And then definitely pushing forward for the playoffs as they're going to have to win games. They're going to have to get the ball slinging and really gel that offense now that Antonio Brown is there a little bit more to hopefully at least get a wild card win as it looks like the Saints have wrapped up the division. Would you say that's true?
Um, I wouldn't say we're completely home free yet. I know that for the most part, you would think that we would be the favorites for the rest of the season, maybe with the exception of I believe it's week 15, we play the Chiefs. But besides that, I know we play Denver this week. There's a week we have Minnesota. So besides that, I think I would like to think that we'd have the division locked down, but you never know.
Yeah, and speaking of the division, I know that it's pretty much you know out of reach for the Patriots for my team, but a little glimmer of hope. Something I'm thankful for is having Damian Harris back and healthy, especially with Sony Michelle going out. Now Burkhead going out, which I know that we'll touch on in a bit, but he's got 300-yard games. As he leans to be the more steadfast back, which this offense needs. The way that you play with somebody like Cam Newton, he's got to really trust somebody that's back there to run those RPO plays, to have somebody on the same level as him. And I know that switching out running backs can kind of hurt that a little bit. Just like in the past game, you have to have the same reps with the same receivers to kind of gel that um, the the momentum going forward for those guys to kind of know exactly where somebody's at and have the chemistry going. So, I'm very thankful as a Patriots fan to have a well-rounded back like Harris is if Sony can't stay healthy, and happy to see what the future holds for the team. I know that everyone expected this year to be a down year for the Patriots, myself included, but I believe they're in the top five for most cap money allowed for next year. So they'll be looking to be buyers ahead of free agency. So happy to see that paired with our running core, kind of intact.
Yeah, I think it's not that much of a sting when you went into the season expecting this to happen. They were going to have an off year, losing one of the greatest quarterbacks to have ever stepped on a field. Um, but I do believe that Damian Harris is kind of what New England was searching for. Even when Tom Brady was there, uh, like I said, one of the greatest to step on the field, and they didn't have any options at receivers. So there wasn't really anything going for them offensive wise. I know establishing a decent run game is kind of where you can start at. I mean, when you get the run game going, you can extend it and get your receivers worked in to the point where they're not feeling 100% of all the pressure on their shoulders.
Now, fantasy speaking, is Damian Harris a guy that you're looking to target in a dynasty league?
In a dynasty league, I think so, definitely, because he's still young, and like you said, they kind of need some time to kind of gel everything together. Damian Harris has been battling injuries. Cam Newton still in his first year there, and he was coming off an injury that kept him out of the season last year. So I think in a dynasty league, he would be a top target to aim for. Um, but as far as their
Now,
receivers, I don't think they found that one receiver that stands out yet.
now, how about if you throw in, say, Taysom Hill? Where's he at on your target list for dynasty if you haven't already gone out and picked him up?
So Taysom Hill, I feel he is the guy because, like I said, he brings that dual threat when it comes to a quarterback being able to throw it. And from what I saw this past week, he is pretty accurate with the ball. So I believe Drew Brees is, teaching him a thing or two there. As we know, Drew Brees is pretty much of a dead eye with the ball. Um, but as far as him being like the clear cut starter, I don't know yet. I can't speak for uh, the Saints as a organization if they think or if they decide him to be the starter from here on out, or if they decide to hand the ball to Winston. Um, but come next year, if they label Taysom Hill as the starter once Breeze decides to hang up, I do believe that he would be a good pickup for many dynasty teams.
Now, what else are you thankful for in this year?
So I'm gonna stay with fantasy wise. Unfortunately, have to go to one of the division rivals, but I'm gonna say that I'm thankful for Robbie Anderson being somewhat of a diamond in the rough. He wasn't really a top receiver going into this season, but actually turned out to be somewhat of a stud. Even though the team that I have him on, I'm still 2-9 in that league.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta agree with you. I was a believer in Anderson just because of where he came from and where he was heading, right? So, if you look at him with the Jets, I mean, you had all kinds of issues last year with quarterback there. Not only injury and sickness, but just overall playability in the carousel that they had, and then moving down into Carolina, where you're getting a new quarterback, a little bit younger, but somebody that's kind of proven in Bridgewater. Somebody that they said, "Hey, this is the guy. We believe in him. We're going out to get him. This is who we want as our franchise guy." And then you pair that with a couple other receivers that you didn't really have to be able to lean on in the Jets organization with DJ Moore and the likes of those guys down there. So definitely somebody that I had targeted, and I'm glad to see that had panned out well for all of his owners. More of a mid-tier type guy, somebody that you're looking at maybe 10 points a game, not really that big boom guy, but just enough to kind of hold your wide receiver 2 or 3 high flex end of things.
Yeah, I believe at most he would be a wide receiver too. Near the beginning of the year, he actually kind of came out the gates running, but over the past couple weeks, kind of started to go on a little bit of a decline. But I wouldn't just say to trade him away just yet, especially maybe in a dynasty league. I think that come next year, when he's had a chance to get more familiar with everybody around him, his quarterback, even the linemen, I think that he could be their guy going forward as Carolina's number one receiver.
Yeah, speaking about big guys moving forward, all around redraft and dynasty, fantasy speaking, for me it's Josh Allen, sitting at number 5 overall within FSA quarterback rankings, having 278.94 points on the year. This was a guy that I was really, really heavy on come preseason, and it's a guy that I said, hey, to me, when you talk about faces of the NFL moving forward with this next generation of quarterbacks, you've got your Mahomes, your Lamars, Jimmy G for a little bit before the injuries, he started to fall out, and then it was Josh Allen was right there for me. I mean, last year he had some accuracy issues early on in the year, which kind of brought his value way down, and people went away from him towards the end of the year. He started to clean them up at the end when they made the playoff push, and then definitely came out this year strong, showing that not only does he have a huge arm to throw the ball deep with now true targets in Stefan Diggs paired with Brown on the other side, but using his legs as well to keep himself relevant within the what has now become of a mobile quarterback game within the NFL. So definitely thankful for him, in for having him in the leagues that I do have him in, but then overall just for proving my point in the direction that the league is moving away from your standard pocket guys, which we've seen, your Mannings fade out, Breeze is fading out, Brady fading out, in the last couple of years and moving towards this, dual threat quarterback to where, hey, now you have to be able to do both to be able to get a starting job anyplace just because of the value that it brings to a team.
Yeah, um, mainly just fantasy wise is when you would want that decent dual threat quarterback. But just for a team as a whole, you can still bring in your Brees, your Brady's, your Mannings, and all that stuff to get you wins. But I mean, Josh Allen, I think he's kind of been sitting on the back burner recently, mainly because he was in that huge shadow of Brady in that division. Because Mahomes led his team to a Super Bowl with that division. Lamar, I know last year he was MVP, and this year I believe is when Josh Allen kind of takes that step forward to be one of the better known younger quarterbacks of this league, especially with having one of his biggest problems, out the division, even out the conference and everything. But I think from here on out is when you'll see Josh Allen just kind of slowly climb up the ranks of draft board.
Now going in to next year, early predictions, in both redraft or in dynasty, if available, via trade, who would you rather have on your team, Lamar or Allen?
Um, I it's hard to say. I was going into this season, I was so favorite of Lamar, but just from the season that he's kind of had, a little bit of a upset. But I think I'm going to lean more towards Allen going into next year. I believe Allen has that dual threat option where he can throw the ball, he can use his legs. He's been getting a lot better at making accurate throws, making smarter throws, and just also because of who's around Allen, I think Allen has more options to throw to than Lamar. I think Stefan Diggs going to the Bills was probably one of the biggest pickups that they could have made for that team, offensive wise. So yeah, I'm gonna lean more towards Allen going into next year.
Yeah, then that leads me right into my next topic here as far as what I'm thankful for this year. And it is none other than my rivals throughout FSA, the mad scientist and Damien. I know he's not on with us yet, but hopefully he pops on here and says hi to us. So, Damien is the proud owner of Josh Allen in our redraft league, which the regular season had just wrapped up and we both missed out. But, the back and forth and the camaraderie, even with division rivals, leads to great competition and only sharpens your game as a fantasy player overall, which led me into picking up Diggs. I know that Damien was high on him, trying to pair him with his quarterback in Allen. And because of that back and forth, kind of made me a little bit better, made me look at different things a little bit um, look at things a little bit differently as I'm evaluating players and teams and trying to build not only my redraft but the dynasties which I was new at this year. I know that to be true by yourself, and then an honorable mention in Bill, Coach Bill of the FSA Lions, for just the same. Helping trade me into a playoff position or hopes of a playoff position, and just the overall valuation of teams going forward. So definitely want to thank those guys, and what they had done for my fantasy game overall.
Yeah, I think um, what some people may not know of like about fantasy is like usually when you go into a fantasy league, you're just joining maybe a bunch of guys that you don't really know, and you're just there for the love of football. But when you're in such a big league like this and you start to build rivalries and all these other things coming into play, it doesn't only just become about football. There's a little more into it. It's like, oh, you're versing your rival this week, so like it's like you're more into it than you would just normally be, just because it's football. So I think when you build rivalries, you build like friendships throughout this league. It makes it so much more worth it to be in a dynasty league or just a redraft league alone.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't heard the back and forth between myself and Damien or Bill, you can always go back and listen to our previous episodes on our podcast versions of the Average Bros, which can be found on both Anchor, Spotify. Could also be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon, Stitcher, and anywhere else you might find your podcasts for your listening pleasures. We're there. Um, if not, we will be there as we are growing this thing that we call FSA at a exponential rate. And as Josh said, we have, I believe, we're up to 5 different leagues, three, four, five, no, up to 7 leagues now. Sorry, we're gaining more by the minute. And I can't keep track of them all, but we got 7 leagues going on, over 150 different players throughout them all, creating that back and forth, which Josh said, underneath the FSA umbrella. So definitely thankful for all of those players, outside of the ones that I mentioned, and FSA in general.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. There's just so much going on with FSA. I know at the beginning of this year, it was kind of just Brian doing his own thing on his own, which kind of leads, I know, both of us actually into our next point for something that we're thankful for is we're just thankful for FSA as a whole for having, me and Kevin join the family as well as, Josh, Brad, and Eric and the Empty Wagon guys, just bringing us all in and just pretty much just starting to build a big family. And just from here on out, the only way you can go is just up.
And speaking of things going up or out, depending on what side of the news you're on, we do bring up the NFL news brought to you by the Recast, the official music of the FSA. What do you got for us this week, Josh?
All right, so starting off, unfortunately, with one of the rookies of this year's class that I was so high on getting for my fantasy teams is currently out this year for the rest of the season. Joe Burrow tore his ACL this past week, so he is done for the season. But I know for all you owners of him in Dynasty, don't let go of him. Obviously, Rex Burkhead, I believe we confirmed right before the show that he did tear his ACL, so he is out for the season. Joe Mixon has been placed on the IR with a foot injury, so he is out for a 3 week minimum. Drew Brees as well has officially been placed on the IR. So this past week made it 1 week, so 2 more weeks that will be without him. Greg Olson has been placed on the IR with a torn fascia, if I'm saying that correctly, in his foot. And finishing it off with Randall Cobb has a toe injury. He is still undergoing tests, but is expected to miss a couple games.
Yeah, a lot of injuries thus far this year. I know this is something that we've touched on pretty much every week as we go through it and the injuries pile up, whether it's because of the longevity of the season or because of a shorter preseason or just increased workloads overall because the league is trending in a younger direction. Um, you know, how do you feel about those younger players as we tend to look more in a dynasty direction now as the playoffs are getting underway for the redraft guys? Guys like Burrow, where does that put his stock at for next year for you as a dynasty owner?
Um, I don't think it really changes his draft stock. Uh, I mean, I know a lot of people are usually worried about, players coming back from serious injuries like that, and they kind of go more of on a decline than they do to increase their stock. But younger players like that, I think they're still just, getting, dipping their foot in the water of NFL, and I think that they can still get the start that they were looking for, even though uh, beginning of their career has been cut short. I'm sorry, beginning of their season, like their opening season, has been cut short. Trying to find the
And
right words there.
that leads me right to my next topic here as we go over our odd man out segment where we look to either start or sit guys based on upcoming matchups and past week's performance, as well as guys we want to add into our lineup to either fill gaps because of injury or underperformance um, from the weeks prior, or leaning on what they've done thus far this season. Who's somebody that you're looking at matchup wise this week, Josh? Because I know that as you see scrolling across the bottom there as we go live here on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, the week's matchups. In week 12, there are no buys, so that leads things to open up a little bit as far as availability within your lineup. Who's somebody that you're looking to target to maybe sit because of those matchups, and who you're starting in their place?
All right, so I'm going to say to sit Ryan Tannehill this week, mainly just because they're going up against top five defense with the Colts. As we saw this past week, the Colts, they've pretty much built an identity as a strong defensive unit going up against the top NFC team in the Packers and taking down Aaron Rodgers and that powerful offense. And the last time that they met, uh, I believe Tannehill only had like 147 yards and only one touchdown, which fantasy wise, I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not something you're going to look for in a quarterback that you want to put in your starting lineup.
And who are you starting in his place?
So starting in his place, I'm going to say to start Tua. They're going up against the 0-10 Jets. Sorry, Brian. And I know that he got benched near the end of the game this past week. So I think that he comes out this week, not so much of a tough opponent. I think that he comes out this week with a little more, fire in his eyes. So he won't get benched this week. And I think that he puts up a pretty decent game because, as we know, Tua is one of those dual threat quarterbacks where he can use his legs and he can throw it. And from what we've seen so far in the past couple of weeks, he hasn't been a half-bag quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at what they've done in the past, with Tua, I don't think that this was in reference to the benching. I don't think this was hey, we're not we're not happy with what you're doing overall. I think this is just we're trying to position ourselves to win every game we can, knowing that we are still actually in the hunt for the first time in a long time to win the division, or worst case scenario, play for a wild card position. And that leads me right into my start and sit of the week. I'm actually looking to sit everybody on the New England Patriots. Cam, all of their receivers, Jacoby Myers, N'Keal Harry. I'm benching them all this week. They are playing a tough Arizona defense that is in a kind of a must-win situation, and not as a putting their season on the line, but more of just because they play in probably one of the toughest divisions in the league, having Russell Wilson lead the Seahawks as well as the Rams and the 49ers. kind of fallen out of things just because of the state of their team throughout injuries. But I'm going to be sitting everyone on New England just because it's going to be a low scoring, gritty game, not really a fantasy point happy game this week. And then on the flip side, just as you mentioned, Tua having a favorable matchup, I think everybody in Miami is going to have a favorable matchup. So I'm starting everybody that I can off that team. Gesicki, their tight end. I'm starting um, their rookie running back, Ahmed. I'm going to look to start Parker. I'm selling them all. You know, putting them all in in spots that I can. As Miami starts to come on hot towards the end of this year.
Now, do you think, honest opinion, do you think that Miami has a decent sized chance to win the division, knowing that they have Josh Allen and the Bills ahead of them?
I would have to take a look at the schedule. I don't know if they've played the Bills yet. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know that they're only a one game out. So I know that it's a pretty decent shot to win. I mean, all you need is the Bills to slip up one game, you're tied. You win one, you've got the tiebreaker. So um, I would give them a pretty decent chance to keep themselves in the ring. But I gotta believe in my guy Josh Allen, as I mentioned earlier. I think he is in the MVP race, so I gotta believe that even if it's by a game, that the Bills are going to tough it out and keep that first place position for themselves.
I'm kind of scrolling through here looking at where Miami's at. They have some favorable matchups, some not so favorable matchups. Like I know they
So
play the Chiefs, the Raiders, they still have the Patriots to play.
yeah, so it looks like so far they played the Patriots
And
once and lost in week one. Week two was the Bills, and they lost there. Then they lost to Seattle week four. That's their three. And as we could look through here, then they lost to the Broncos. But looking ahead, that means that they still have um, three division games: the Jets, which will be a win, a toss up against the Bills and New England. So they've got to beat the Bills in week 17. So to me, that could be the deciding factor, week 17, last game of the season against the Bills, to where they split that and then go off a division record, which they could, pull away with as long as they um, take the Jets and the Patriots game. So fate is kind of in their hands, I would say, but I still lean towards Josh Allen and the Bills.
yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that even still, I think the Dolphins are getting on a pretty hot roll, but I don't think it's enough to take down the Bills and what they have going for them right now. Maybe next year, once Tua has a year under his belt, some experience under his belt, they can get something going as far as taking the division. But I don't completely count them out as far as a wild card spot, though.
Who are you looking at your second start set of the week?
So my second sit of this week shouldn't really be a surprise because of just how downhill this team has went ever since they lost their quarterback. But I'm looking to sit Amari Cooper this week. They're going up against Washington, and Washington still has the number one passing defense. And like I said, without Dak being there, their passing game has pretty much been slim to non-existent. I mean, Andy Dalton came back, had a decent game this past week, but like I said, they're going up against a top team with Washington. So I think that Washington, stands up and shuts them down this Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you there. I think that, out of all of the bad teams in the um, NFC least, the Cowboys, Giants, Washington, and the Eagles, I think that the Washington's probably in the best situation out of all of them as of late. They have the solid defense to stick themselves in games. The only cylinder that they're not really hitting on is the run game, which needs to come on a little bit stronger. They've got Scary Terry and Alex Smith. I think that not having a solid quarterback week in, week out because of the injuries that they've had has hurt them a bit. But it is still anyone's game out of that division. So a Cowboys win this week could, be just the thing to, get them back into the swing of things and be the fire that they needed.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that that division is still up for grabs, and just to see the records of all those teams. I mean, I think it's out of reach for the Giants, but as far as Cowboys, Washington, and Eagles, I still think it's anyone's division at that point.
Well,
But I do think Washington has the best chance to win. So
right now, as it stands, um, every team except the Eagles is 3-7, and then the Eagles are 3-6-1 because of the tie against the Bengals. So it is still literally anybody's game. Pretty much in the fate is in their own hands as far as just winning out the divisional matchups that they have left, and then maybe sneaking one outside the division to kind of put the icing on the cake. But I agree with you as far as the standpoint of just abysmal overall look at that division. Who are you looking to start in the place of Cooper?
So to start in his place, I'm going to go from one Cooper to another. I'm going to say to start Cooper Cup. I think with uh, this past week, I think Devontae Adams said it best: is that Cooper Cup is one of the most underrated receivers in the league right now. Which I underrated him myself. I didn't think he was that strong of a receiver. I think he was more of like a slot receiver, kind of like a Julian Edelman. And also just because I know Jared Goff has his weeks where he can shine, he cannot shine. But I know this past week, I know Cooper Cup kind of proved himself, be able to put in your starting lineup this week. They're going up against a battered and bruised 49ers defense, and I think that the pairing between Goff and Cup, I think they keep the ball rolling this week.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest thing that leads to the overshadowing of Cup is just the overall standpoint of that offense, right? You've got Robert Woods, you've got Higbee, Cup himself. There's there's a plethora of tier two receivers on the team to where no one yet has really taken the reins of been the clear cut number one. Kind of like a Minnesota situation to where this past week we've seen we saw Adam Thielen light it up. Then the week prior it was Jefferson. The week before that it was the run game and Cook. You got the same situation for the Rams every single week. You've got a different receiver, and not necessarily a bad thing for the team as overall, but as a fantasy standpoint, it really hurts when you can't depend on somebody, and you really have to look matchup dependent, and all the way down to corner versus receiver matchup and defensive schemes to see, hey, who is really going to be the favored receiver in each game, moving forward to start. I do agree with you, though, for this week. I think he is a solid start, especially coming off of a decent game last week. I think that they'll look to push more targets his way as the season progresses.
Who's your second sit of this week?
For me, I am going to be sitting Matt Ryan. He has been the epitome of boom bust quarterbacks thus far this year. He's got good games where he's in high scoring bouts against top defenses or top teams in general. Then he comes back and then he lays eggs, or at least is underwhelming in his performances. This week that they play a tough Raiders team, which just went to blows again with the Chiefs, and coming down to the wire. I think they kind of roll that into this week, knowing that this is going to be a must-win for them to try to stake claim to the division. That they're still right in the thick of things to win if Kansas City falters a little bit and drops another loss, to anybody that's not the Raiders. And then in his place, I'm going to look to start. Your guy, we mentioned a couple of times throughout the show here, is Taysom Hill. I think that, week in and week out, he's only going to get better, getting those first team reps. He's already, for me, the hardest guy to figure out and to game plan for is the guy that knows everything, and has that, really high football IQ, and that's Taysom Hill. It's something that we mentioned about Brady and about Manning. It's how is your understanding of the game as a whole? And if you're Taysom Hill, you know all of the receiver looks because you've played it. You know the tight end looks because you've played it, and you even know out of the backfield those different types of looks and what you're looking for as a defense. Because you've been put in the situations to have to read them to make the plays. So when you put that guy at quarterback, it only makes him that much stronger. Now he just has to pair it with the play of the physical ability, which I know he has. He just has to step it up to be starting quarterback material, which will only come in time. So this week, he's my start.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with you. Matt Ryan is kind of, back and forth. Like you said, he'll have some weeks where he proves to be a good starter. He'll have some weeks where, you might as well just drop him to free agency. But Taysom Hill, on the other hand, I mean, you said it best. He's just from here on out, he's only going to get better. He knows every position. He has the ability to do all these things for a team. And I think the only thing that just needs to be worked on is just getting the starting reps, becoming more confident in yourself in the pocket. Um, just taking a second to kind of slow down, know your reads, uh, take a second to look at this receiver, look at that receiver, instead of just going straight to that last ditch effort of running out of the pocket and picking it up with your legs, which makes me believe why that both of his touchdowns were rushing touchdowns. I think over time, when he becomes more confident in himself, he's gonna sit in the pocket a little more, kind of like what Breeze does, and he's gonna look for the open targets, whether it's his first read or his third read.
Yeah, I mean, it bodes well for him that that third read is usually going to be Kamara, who we've seen absolutely dominate both on the field and then through fantasies thus far this year. So not a bad third read to have for himself as he moves forward. And speaking of third reads and guys that are last in progression, last looks throughout fantasy, somebody that you might be looking to add because of injury this week. If you are an owner of a Mixon or another running back that's underperforming, maybe like a Miles Sanders, if you will. The guy that I'm looking to pick up off the waivers this week is going to be Salvon Ahmed, the running back rookie from Miami, a guy that performed okay last week, but they kind of cleared house at Miami. They got rid of, um, uh, God, what's his name? He's now with the Chargers. Balaj. They got rid of Jordan Howard, so they kind of paved the way for him to have to be the guy. The only other person that's there right now, I believe, is Breida. So, I think that he's kind of taken that on as as a chance to move forward with Tua and kind of get that rookie vibe and coach up each other, trying to form a solid chemistry there moving forward. So in a favorable matchup this week against the Jets, he's the guy I'm looking to add myself.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that we're saying to add a player from the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely flipped from last year, right? I mean, last year was a two-horse race out of the NFC, or sorry, AFC East. The Patriots and the Bills trailing slightly behind, getting one of the wild card spots, and then Miami and the Jets nowhere to be found within the division. Then this year being flipped completely upside down. You got the Bills running away with things, so it seems away from everybody outside of Miami, then the Patriots falling towards the back half of the pack with an outside chance at the wild card. And then, of course, the Jets not even being able to muster up one win so far. Do you think they'll get one this year?
Uh, it all depends on their matchups. I mean, this week, the Dolphins, they're still the Dolphins. They have weeks where they're good, and then they have weeks like this past week where they end up benching their starter. So I think if they catch the right team off guard, like they go into a game, their opponent is kind of walking in there knowing 100% that they're going to win, and they catch a team off guard, I think they could sneak a win away. But I mean, who knows at this point? The Jets are the Jets.
You think it's Trevor Lawrence time?
I, for their sake, I think so. I mean, Joe Flacco seemed like it was a nice pickup just because we know what Joe Flacco has done in the past. Sam Darnold, I don't think he's their guy. I mean, last season didn't really do much, but at the same time, it was his rookie season, and then wait, no, he was a rookie last year, right?
Who?
Darnold.
No, I don't think so. No, he's been around a while, a
So
couple
okay,
years anyway.
it was 2 years ago that he was a rookie then.
Possibly, I would have to look it up. We don't have a stat guy tonight.
I know, yeah, I'm used to having a stat guy, but nonetheless, he was young, so they kind of said like, "Oh, it'll come with age. It'll come with age." But I don't think Darnold's their guy. I think that they kind of sandbag this year and just say, let's just go out and get Trevor Lawrence next year, or whenever he decides to enter into the NFL.
Yeah, speaking of somebody going out and and leading the way, as Trevor Lawrence has looked to be the top guy within this upcoming draft for the NFL, we bring to you our favorite segment of the show, our top dogs of this upcoming week, brought to you by Nature Coast Tailgating, our World Championship sponsor. And if you're checking us out for the first time, what we do here week in, week out is we predict who we believe is going to be the top dog across two different slots. We pick one quarterback apiece and then one flex. That's everybody that is not a quarterback, your running back, tight ends, and receivers. And then we give ourselves a score. If my if my player that I pick outscores Josh's, I will get 1 point. But if I do predict the top dog, the top scorer for that position, I get a bonus point and add 2 to my total score. Josh, so far we're all tied up at 10 apiece with a big win for you last week, getting 3 points because of our little bonus bet on the Thursday night game, bringing things to even for us.
Yeah, it was actually very close between Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray. Not even a half a point deficit between them, but I think it was the right week to kind of make a little wager and get myself back into the mix.
Yeah, yourself taking Russell Wilson, who had 21.58 points within the MFL and FSA standard scoring system, and then myself taking the quarterback opposite of him in that game, Kyler Murray, who had 21.26 points. As you said, only zero point 0.3 back from him. Tougher matchup. And then on the flex side of things, you taking that win as well as you took Dalvin Cook, as we mentioned earlier. Every single week it seems like one guy blows up, and when it comes specifically to the Vikings, it's always the guy that we don't take. It was Adam Thielen who stole the show and was the top target out of that game. Cook netted himself 27 points. And then my flex spot, also from the Vikings, was Justin Jefferson, who only put together 17.6. Not a awful game, but not enough to get the win out of last week's picks.
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, all three options, I mean, not bad fantasy wise. Even Justin Jefferson putting up 17 points, it's not bad. It's just it just wasn't enough to win our top dog section.
Yeah, which Thielen was the top dog for last week. It was Deshaun Watson out of the quarterbacks with 36.36 points, and then Thielen had himself a day with 31.3 points. So not that far off of Cook, and certainly not too far ahead. You're talking one touchdown out of Jefferson if it's lean one way or the other, where you're swapping spots there. So definitely a tight race. Looking forward, who are you taking this week as your top dog at quarterback?
So this week I'm going strictly mainly because of the matchup, just because I want to, push to see this player beat Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to go with Patrick Mahomes this week. We all know what the Chiefs are capable of doing. Um, I know I took him, I believe a couple weeks ago, and it's a little bit back and forth taking him because you never know what they're going to do, if they're going to blow up on the passing game or the running game. I just think that Tampa Bay has such a good rushing defense that they're going to be forced to go the passing game, which is going to lead to Patrick Mahomes blowing up fantasy wise.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to look at that matchup that we mentioned a few times throughout the show in the Miami Jets game, and I'm going to take Tua. I think that he stands out this week. I think him and Devontae Parker start to gel that chemistry and that relationship a little bit more and propels himself to be a top dog. And then we talked about, the way that the NFL is moving and the motion of quarterbacks out of pure passers into hybrid dual threat guys, and Tua happens to be one of them. I think that he gets things moving a little bit more with his legs and comes out this week as the top dog.
I agree with you on the matchup, but let's just hope that it isn't enough to beat Patrick Mahomes. And who are
Who do
you
you
going to
have?
take?
For
Oh,
me, for my flex spot, I
yeah, go
have
ahead.
somebody paired up with another mobile quarterback this week, hoping that things lend more towards the arm than the legs. Is Stefan Diggs in a favorable matchup this week? I think that him playing the Chargers, is able to beat them deep a little bit and open things up. Um, with Moss coming back in the run game for them, that's kind of stabilize that a little bit to make them back up a little bit and respect both games, especially with Josh Allen being able to use his legs, which makes them press up front a little bit, opens up that deep ball that we talked about, and hopefully leads me to another top dog win.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to go with DK Metcalf this week. We all know that he has a reliable quarterback throwing to him, also knows how to use his legs as well. But when you're going into the NFC least, you can never go wrong with picking a player going up against any of these four teams. And this week, they just so happen to be playing the Eagles on Monday night. And unfortunately, I don't see it very well going Eagles' way. I'm hoping that
Yeah,
it's I'm hoping that it's lights out for the Eagles with everything going to DK.
yeah. I mean, this is a matchup that I'm specifically going to watch pretty close because of everything else around it out off the field wise. This is a guy that last year, I believe it was, I forget if it was in the playoffs or on the playoff push for the Eagles. DK came in and absolutely ran all over him, couldn't be stopped. Just beat them downfield for a deep ball all over. Nobody, it looked like nobody was ever covering him at any point throughout the game. And he just so happens to be a receiver that the Eagles had passed on 2 years ago in the draft, to go out and pick up a handful of other guys, and you pass up on talent that I assume could only benefit the Eagles, especially with all the injuries that they faced and all the underperforming performances that they faced throughout the past couple of seasons here. But you've got to think that there's some type of vengeance there. That he just wants to go out and perform against a team like this that kind of overlooked him.
Oh yeah, I think that's always on every player's mind when they're going up against a team that overlooked them in the draft. Maybe they reached out to them and said they had some type of interest for him, and then they overlook them. I think when you actually play that team, you have a little animosity there, and it kind of pushes him to go out there and make those spectacular catches, fight for the extra yards, reach the ball up for a touchdown. It pushes them to do better things than they normally would.
Right. Well, that brings us up to the end of the formal portion of our show for this week. And before we return back here to our regularly scheduled Average Bros Fantasy Show on December the 1st at 8 o'clock, live on Facebook, YouTube, and on Twitter. Check out our flagship program tomorrow, the Fanatically Real broadcast with myself and Brian at 8:30, live on the same platforms. And then check out the Empty Wagon guys, Josh, Brad, and Eric, as they talk fantasy with a whole bunch of comedy. They give you their heroes and villains for the upcoming week on Saturday, the 28th at midnight. Then, of course, our happy hour on Zoom of previewing the Sunday night game, which will be on the 29th, right around 8:15 before kickoff. And then wrapping the week up again with the Empty Wagon guys on the 30th at midnight as well. And before we head out of here, we do want to give a special thanks to all of our sponsors. As I throw it up on the screen here, we want to thank our QB Arm and Leg League, or thank QB 54 for our Arm and Leg League, our broadcast sponsor, Football Darts. Then we want to thank our World Championship sponsor, Nature Coast Tailgating. Then all of our other bowl game sponsors, Finger Lake Mercantile, Cranky Veteran Candle Company, Southern Siren Sugar Scrub, Deep South Creation, and of course, The Recast, who is the official music of FSA. Josh, got anything else for us as we head on out?
Just gonna wrap it up with happy Thanksgiving, everybody, and I will see you guys next week after many food.
Yes, of course, as Josh mentioned, Thanksgiving is coming up on Thursday. We do have 3 games, I believe it is, on Thursday. So make sure that you guys are setting your lineups accordingly. And remember, leftovers are for quitters. Everybody, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.